Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Monday, November the 22nd, 2021. I'm going to start today with the terrible event in Waukesha, Wisconsin. But first, I wanted to draw your attention to a tweet that I came across that is quite wise. And it seems simple enough when you think about it, but here we go. If you want to understand the average Antifa member, you have to realize that she or he is having fun. There might be a thin veneer of ideology underpinning their actions, but reading A Clockwork Orange would bring you much closer to their mentality than any Marxist screed. Of course, when you read A Clockwork Orange or see Kubrick's film version, you understand why Alex and his droogs do these terrible things. Violence is fun. It's also, as Marshall McLuhan pointed out, the quest for identity. And if one looks at the Antifa members, particularly in their mug shots, there seems to be a distinct lack of identity there. President-elect Turning Point responded, sure, they are minions of the regime, but they get to LARP as warriors for the downtrodden. It's also fun for them, just as shoplifting or vandalism is fun for feral criminals. KVG Cutler Bay responded, I suspect their organizers are supplying them with drugs aplenty too. I would bet that as the Blitzkrieg ran on amphetamines, Antifa and BLM run on meth and fentanyl. The real headline says Blake Masters is black felon released days ago on $1,000 bail, kills 5 and injures 40 by driving SUV into Christmas parade. Instead, they want you to believe that Kyle Rittenhouse, acquitted by a jury, is the real threat to society. Is this racial equity? The absolute fury of so many people on the left, and strangely so many black people on the left with regard to the Rittenhouse verdict. Well, this was a white man who killed 2 white men and severely injured another. So how can we see this? Was Kyle Rittenhouse's greatest sin that he somehow desecrated a Black Lives Matter riot? Seems that way. This is from the Daily Mail. Several reporters. Milwaukee County DA admits it was a mistake to grant $1,000 bail to SUV driving felon days before he smashed into Christmas parade. Darrell Brooks was freed after running over mother of his child and is now charged with homicide after killing 5. I've been talking for quite some time on this live stream, and even before that, that racial equity in the justice system, what it really means is that the law doesn't apply to black people. That since the law is white supremacist, white nationalist even, and since the agents of the law, of the police and the judicial system, they are white supremacist or white nationalist, that it is simply not just to try black people for anything. And this leads to the elimination of bail, or bail turned into a joke. The shamefaced Milwaukee District Attorney's Office admitted Monday it was inappropriate for convicted felon Darrell Brooks to bail out of jail on a $1,000 bond 3 weeks ago after trying to run over his ex-girlfriend as he was charged with 5 counts of murder for the lives he took at the Waukesha Christmas parade Sunday night. Brooks, 39, was taken into custody in Waukesha, Wisconsin, Sunday night after police found his red Ford SUV parked neatly in a driveway 5 blocks from where he drove through crowds of kids and elderly dancing groups. The amateur rapper, but of course, has a long criminal history dating back to 1999 with more than 15 arrests in the state of Wisconsin alone for charges including possession of drugs, strangulation and suffocation, battery, illegally possessing firearms as a convicted felon, and resisting arrest. On Sunday, he was fleeing the scene of a domestic dispute when he crashed into the crowds after smashing through safety barriers and breezing past cops. More on that in just a minute. One officer tried to stop him by shooting at his car, but he stopped because there were too many people around for him to safely fire his weapon. Police had just arrived at the home that Brooks had fled when he plowed into the parade grounds, killing 5 adults. The victims have been identified as dancing grannies Virginia Sorensen, 79, Leanna Owens, 71, and Tamara Durand, 52, Citizen Bank employee Jane Coolidge, 52, and 82-year-old Wilhelm Hospel, the husband of one of the grannies. The Waukesha Police Department have now arrested Brooks on 5 murder charges. On November the 2nd, he was arrested on domestic violence charges after trying to run over his ex, the mother of his child, at a gas station. His bail was set at $1,000, and he posted it November the 11th. On Monday morning, the Milwaukee County DA's office released a statement admitting it was inappropriately low given his criminal history. They say they'd launched an internal review as to why he was able to get out on bond to commit more crimes. Milwaukee County Attorney John T. Chisholm previously spoke of trying to reduce his county's prison population. He even led a progressive criminal justice nonprofit called Vera perform an audit on his office. Vera, which is based in New York, opposes cash bail, with the implementation of that measure partially blamed for a crime spike in New York City. Milwaukee saw murders spike by 95% between 2019 and 2020, with 2021 currently recording as many homicides as there were by the same stage of 2020. At a press conference Monday afternoon, Waukesha Police Chief Dan Thompson said this is not a terrorist event. It was just, for lack of a better word, carnage. There were adults, children's injured. Some of our first responders were there with their families, and they left their families to treat people. People with military backgrounds likened it to a war zone. Between July 2020 and February 2021, Brooks was in custody awaiting a trial date on a $7,500 bond for shooting at his nephew after a fight over his old cell phone. The bond was dropped to $500 in February because the courts couldn't give him a trial quickly enough. He was arrested again November 2nd in Milwaukee for hunting down the mother of one of his children at a hotel, then following her in the street with his SUV and running her over in the parking lot of a gas station after she refused to get in his car. The Daily Mail has obtained copies of his arrest warrant for that incident Monday, which revealed he followed her to a gas station, punched her with a closed fist, and then ran her over. Yes, it's going to be very hard to make Darrell Brooks into a martyr, but I suspect there will be considerable efforts to explain away his monstrousness. Now we have, Jim Hoft at Gateway Pundit says, it was intentional. Christmas parade killer Darrell Brooks charged with 5 counts of intentional homicide. The media was wrong again. You see, it was just a mistake. It was just bad circumstances. And here we see an example of that from Scott Bauer, Michael Balsamo, and Mike Householder at the Associated Press. The man suspected of plowing his SUV into a Christmas parade in suburban Milwaukee, killing at least 5 people and injuring 48, had left the scene of a domestic dispute just minutes before, Waukesha's police chief said Monday. Police Chief Dan Thompson said there is no evidence the crash on Sunday was a terrorist attack or that the suspect, Darrell Brooks Jr., knew anyone in the parade. Yes, and I saw elsewhere there was some sort of dispute about a knife, supposedly, as in who is going to stab whom. I mentioned this before, but after the shootings The fatal shootings at Kent State University and Jackson State University in the spring of 1970, when college students returned to their classrooms in September, the revolutionary movement in the United States, well, at least on college campuses, it all but disappeared. And Tom Wolfe explained this as students learning that playing at revolution can get you killed, which may be a lesson relearned after the Rittenhouse verdict. This is from Legal Insurrection. The 2020 Antifa BLM violent crime spree in Democrat-run cities across the nation was not just approved, but was championed by Democrat officials, some of whom dismissively noted that burning down buildings and looting businesses was righteous. And besides, who cares anyway, since the businesses are insured? This blasé disregard for the livelihood of the minority and less affluent constituents targeted by Antifa BLM didn't stop with elitists shrugged shoulders and taking a knee in solidarity with the arsonists, vandals, looters, assailants, and murderers who rampaged in these cities. Democrat mayors and governors insisted that police stand down, that they let these criminals have free, destructive run of the cities, that law enforcement stand around to be assaulted by vicious street thugs, throwing frozen water bottles and worse at them, blinding them for life with lasers and smacking them in the head with whatever bricks they found on conveniently located, magically appearing pallets of bricks. What the left doesn't understand is that abolishing or defunding the police, or neutering police, as Democrats did during the burning, looting, and murder sprees of 2020, doesn't lead to some leftist bully fest. For normal Americans, a dystopian nightmare in which leftist, mostly peaceful arsonists, vandals, looters, and murderers rule the streets of American towns and cities. The whose streets, our streets mantra is just one memorable chant from the summer of Democrat-colluded national destruction. This is still America, much to their chagrin, and in the absence of police protection and intervention, the American people can and will protect themselves and their fellow citizens from lawless mobs bent on mayhem, violence, and destruction. We saw this in Chicago, where the Latin Kings and other Hispanic and Latino street gangs stepped up to protect their neighborhoods. And we saw this in Minneapolis, where heroic Black citizens coordinated a lawfully armed defense of their neighborhoods against the vilest leftist mobs bent on destruction. Yeah, oddly, they think they are defending against white supremacists, but however misled by leftist propaganda, they did the right thing for the right reasons, even if it was against the wrong perp. No white supremacists burned Minneapolis or any other city. It was all the Democrats and their team. If you watch the Washington Post video report on Black Minneapolis residents rightly organizing to protect their neighborhoods while legally armed, you will see strong, organized, and determined people who reject the destruction being wrought in their neighborhoods. Sadly, you will also see citizens who have no other recourse but to protect their neighborhood in the absence of a viable police presence because police have been told to stand down by Democrat officials. Progressives apparently think that pulling police will just loose the mobs on a cowed and terrorized American populace, but that is not what happens. On Sunday, presumably legally armed BLM protesters acted as citizen security for a socialist protest against the Rittenhouse verdict. The armed persons reportedly, wait for it, drove across state lines from Illinois to offer protection to the actually peaceful protesters. Yeah, you're not going to hear about this from the Democrat propagandist media. You're also not going to hear that seeing guns lawfully open carried makes the Second Amendment supporting rights heart sing. Democrats on the left despise this kind of thing, though, unless it's their side doing the lawful open carry. As we saw with the year-long defamation of Kyle Rittenhouse, they think that rioters, arsonists, looters, vandals, assailants, and murderers should just run free when the police are told to stand down. If they can't do that, if they can't destroy with complete protection, up to including bail funds promoted by Kamala Harris, and without any citizen daring to stand up for them, then what's the point? Bullies and tyrants need fear to control the unwashed masses. The left started instilling that fear when the McCloskeys were charged with felonies for simply standing armed on their own porch as Antifa BLM mobs allegedly broke into their property and allegedly threatened to kill them and their dog and to burn down the house. The message was clear. You cannot defend yourself from the violent leftist mob. Indeed, while you might be beaten to within an inch of your life or outright killed, your life is essentially over because we will bankrupt you, smear your name, and destroy your life. So submit. And then Kyle Rittenhouse happened. The same laws that allow lawfully armed black residents to patrol their neighborhoods with the gushing approval of the Washington Post apply to white guys? Go figure. As odd as it seems, this is where we are. The usual leftist suspects are blah, 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 and white supremacy and systemic racism because they don't yet understand that is ridiculous nonsense that will never win them a single new vote and will likely lose them formally reliable voters. And, oh yes, is it time for Kyle Rittenhouse to get paid? One would think that after what happened with the Covington Catholic boys, that the media would be a little more circumspect in its language. But nope, not a bit of it. Tiffany Cross of MSNBC is absolutely furious, calling Kyle Rittenhouse a, quote, murderous white supremacist. Well, he was found not guilty of murder on 2 counts by a court. And if that is not defamation, I do not know what is. And I'm looking at a picture of, what's his name, Eli Mistal. And every time I see his face, I burst into laughter because he appears to be wearing a clown wig. But nevertheless, this is from Steve Watson at Summit News. One day after Kyle Rittenhouse was found innocent on all counts by a jury in Wisconsin, MSNBC race baiter Tiffany Cross stumbled into a surefire defamation suit by labeling Rittenhouse a, quote, little murderous white supremacist, unquote. In a Saturday broadcast, she declared, I find these people disgusting, adding, I'm disgusted at what I'm seeing. She continued, the fact that white supremacists roam the halls of Congress freely and celebrate this little murderous white supremacist, and the fact that he gets to walk the streets freely, it lets you know these people have access to instituting laws. They run the legislative branch. Oh, really? I thought the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress. Cross's guest, the nation's legal correspondent Eli Mistal, also waded in proclaiming, welcome to the modern American party. This is what these people want. And this is what the majority of white people vote for. When I say that majority of white people are in favor of this kind of violence, it's because a majority of white people consistently vote Republican. Since the passage of the Civil Rights Act, a majority of white people have voted Republican. So like this is the party they are supporting. A majority of white people pick judges like Bruce Schroeder, not appointed by a Republican. The judge in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, a majority of white people do not support policies that would unpack and unroll, whatever that means, and reform the system of justice. This is what they want. This is not a miscarriage of justice. This is justice working as intended for white people, Mistal further said. Attorney Jenna Ellis pointed out that murder is a legal definition. Kyle was acquitted. This is textbook defamation with actual malice. MSNBC, and to a lesser extent CNN, seem to be devoted to the proposition that it is impossible for white and black people to live together. They seem to be pushing for segregation. Perhaps they'll get it. This is from Yaron Steinbuch at the New York Post. An Illinois Democrat has been blasted for describing the deadly Christmas parade rampage in Wisconsin as karma for the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse. Mary Lemansky, who is listed as the social media director for the Democratic Party in DuPage County, began her heartless online tirade by snarkily dismissing the tragedy as just self-defense. In a tweet that's since been deleted, living Wisconsin, he probably felt threatened. Another tweet, which was still online Monday morning, read, referring to the driver being held as a person of interest in the Waukesha incident, which left 5 people dead and dozens injured. I believe, yes, this woman is an actress. Lemansky, who also lists herself as an acting student with the famed Second City Improvisational Comedy Group in Chicago, also wrote that the Christmas parade rampage was karma in another tweet that appears to have since been deleted. I'm sad anytime anyone dies. I don't believe you, Mary. I just believe in karma, and this came around quick on the citizens of Wisconsin, Lemansky wrote. You reap what you sow. It's sad people died, but when you open the door to vigilante justice, everyone seems threatening. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to mention now because it's significant in terms of, oh, yes, it was just an accident, It was just an accident. I don't know how this fellow Brooks could be charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. Bevo Fox at Twitter tweeted, and he has a map. The Waukesha Christmas Parade rampage is terrible. Plotting the driver's path using 8 witness videos shows that his rampage covered at least 8 intersections over at least 1/2 mile. It was not an event at one intersection. It was continuous at several intersections along Main Street. Let's go to the chat. Okay, hello to No Sleep Till Breezewood, PA, Dan, and Run Contracu, Pelcasso 88, William Hicks, Joke Again 666, Sam B, Pelcasso 88, notes episode 400. Indeed. No Sleep Till Breezewood, PA says, can't believe we got this far. Hello to Gamayan. He was fleeing, my God, the word fleeing as if he is a victim, says Kontiki Roulette. How do you offer bail to a bail jumping offense, says Chogokin 666. I don't know, maybe it's the fool me once, shame on you, fool me 17 times, shame on me rule. Okay, who else do we have here? Have you ever seen a new show called Yellow Jackets? Pelcasso 88 says. I haven't seen it. Dan says, I'm sure Mark Ruffalo will have a cute nickname for him. Their ordinary crime is the equivalent of terror, says Dr. Dead Name. Scott S. says, oopsie. Did Brooks cross any state lines? Asked Anrun. Apparently he's a registered sex offender in Nevada, so he has at least, twice in his life crossed state lines. And Governor James Rhodes ordered the National Guard to Kent State, and Nixon got blamed for it, says Yo Mama. Ban Christmas parade, says Gamian. I'm not the first person to ask the obvious question. Why would you have a Christmas parade before Thanksgiving Day? Latin King Security Services, says Dr. Deadname. Hello to Divot the Gnome. Dan, state lines say it ain't so. I was expecting a girl power woke fest, but it's actually a pretty dark examination of female psychopathy, because that's referring to Yellow Jackets. I watched it after Succession last night, and I'll have something to say about last night's episode today. Hello to 1467 Masterson Wilson. I certainly wasn't expecting them to be more circumspect, says Anrun. Eli Mistel's hair puts Don King's to shame, says Yo Mama. I think you're right. Papcasso 88 says, my cousin roommate thinks Rittenhouse shot into an unarmed crowd. No Sleep says, Illinois Dem with OnlyFans account. You can't make this up. I recall a few years ago, the Parti Québécois, or it could have been the Bloc Québécois, one is provincial, one is federal, had an MP or MPP, whatever they call them. I should have looked this up. Who was a priest, a Catholic priest, who had formerly been a male prostitute. Yes. And how does a male prostitute get to be a priest anyway? Of course, this is Quebec, so I shouldn't ask that question. Okay. Hello to Lefty Gun. De Blasio has already commissioned a mural to honor Brooks. They have a Christmas parade before Thanksgiving here too for some reason. Oscar Toe, good job on the 400, Kevin. Why, thank you. I'm reminded of the Community Christmas episode, the first one, where Shirley keeps complaining that people aren't acting, in the spirit of Christmas. And our leading man keeps saying, it's December the 11th. Of course, you're all aware of this, right? Office Christmas parties on December the 11th. How about an office Christmas party on Christmas Eve? Hmm? Of course, I learned why that rarely happens is because so many of the people, at least where I used to work, they would be on vacation, in Jamaica or Hawaii or someplace. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, so we have to have our Christmas party on December the 10th or whatever, because a bunch of rich people are off getting suntans. Doesn't seem fair to me. Kontiki Roulette says, it's a clear indication we are at war when one side celebrates an atrocity as a victory. And now, what else do we have? Oh, yes, same subject here. Ill timing, one could say. Ill timing. This is Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. CNN published a front page op-ed in the aftermath of the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict titled, "There's nothing more frightening today than an angry white man." Oh, really? Who causes more damage in America? Angry white men or angry black men? The timing of the article is somewhat awkward given that a black career criminal just plowed through a Christmas parade in Wisconsin, killing at least 5 and injuring dozens more, some of their children. The op-ed, which is written by John Blake, attempts to smear Rittenhouse by lumping in with QAnon radicals and others who took part in the January 6th parade on the Capitol, as well as white supremacists who attended the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. In the piece, Blake decries a vision of white masculinity that allows some white men to feel as if they can rule and brutalize without consequence. Well, it appears that this Darrell Brooks fellow got away with brutalizing his ex-girlfriend, punching her with a closed fist and then running her over. This angry white man has been a major character throughout U.S. history. He gave the country slavery, the slaughter of Native Americans, and Jim Crow laws. His anger also helped fuel the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. Insurrection, was it? It's this angry white man, not the black or brown man you see approaching on the street at night, who poses the most dangerous threat to democracy in America. He said, okay. You might remember that no less than Jesse Jackson confessed some years ago that he's walking alone on the street at night and he hears footsteps behind him and he turns his head and sees that it is white people and not black people. He utters a sigh of relief. According to Breitbart's Paul Boyce, the editorial is clear proof that CNN has gone full racist. A simple check of violent crime statistics, when broken down by demographic, also demolishes the entire premise of the article. Well, what if the violence is, justified? What if it's righteous, right? So it's not really violence then, right? I think that's what Blake may mean. Although perhaps he's just stupid and ignorant enough to actually believe that crime statistics in the United States are the opposite of what they are. Oh, yes. But enough about horror. How about some good news? This is from Ben Smith at the New York Times. The trailer for Tucker Carlson's special about the January 6th mob at the Capitol landed online on October 27th, and that night, Jonah Goldberg sent a text to his business partner, Stephen Hayes. "I'm tempted just to quit Fox over this." "I'm game," Hayes replied. "Totally outrageous. It will lead to violence. Not sure how we can stay." The full special, Patriot Purge, appeared on Fox's online subscription streaming service days later. And last week, the two men, both paid Fox News contributors, finalized their resignations from the network. And of course, a nation wept. In some ways, their departure should not be surprising. It's simply part of the new rights mopping up operation in the corners of conservative institutions that still house pockets of resistance to Donald Trump's control of the Republican Party. Goldberg, a former National Review writer, and Hayes, a former Weekly Standard writer, were stars of the pre-Trump conservative movement. They clearly staked out their positions in 2019 when they founded The Dispatch, an online publication that they described as a place that thoughtful readers can come from conservative, fact-based news and commentary. It now has nearly 30,000 paying subscribers. Does it now? Their departures also mark the end of a lingering hope among some at Fox News, strange as this is for outsiders to understand, that the channel would at some point return to a pre-Trump reality that was also often hyper-partisan, but that kept some distance from Republican officials. Fox's chairman, Rupert Murdoch, recently deplored Trumpism while acting as though, as Bloomberg's Tim O'Brien noted, he didn't run the company. The reality of Fox and similar institutions is that many of their leaders feel that the tight bond between Trump and their audiences or constituents leaves them little choice but to go along, whatever they believe. Oh, yes, and then no one else in America is in that situation. And in a polarized age, the greatest opportunities for ratings, money, and attention, as politicians and media outlets left and right have discovered, are on the extreme edges of American politics. Carlson became the network's most watched primetime host by playing explicitly to that fringe. Fringe. Oh, okay. It's a fringe. It's a far-right fringe. And how many votes did Donald Trump get in that election last November? How many votes did he get? 74.2 million votes. Does that sound like a fringe to anyone? No, I don't think so. But maybe that these votes don't really count to the New York Times. Let's see. Yes. Oh, yes. He explored an alternate history, Carlson did, of January 6th, in which the violence was a false flag and the consequence has been the persecution of conservatives. Goldberg said that he and Hayes stayed on at Fox News as long as they did because of a sense from conversations at Fox that after Trump's defeat, the network would try to recover some of its independence and, as he put it, right the ship. Yes, and apparently if Goldberg left, then there would be a sad deficit of Battlestar Galactica references and also nauseating shout-outs to his dog. I mean, you just can't pay enough for that kind of stuff. Patriot Purge was a sign that people have made peace with this direction of things, and there is no plan, at least that anyone made me aware of, for a course correction. Now righting the ship is an academic question. The Patriot Purge thing meant, okay, we hit the iceberg now, and I can't do the rationalizations anymore. Hayes, 51, and Goldberg, 52, spoke to me over video from their homes in the Washington, D.C. area, both clad in athleisure. I've never seen that word before, athleisure, athleisure. Has anyone else seen that? And sporting graying beards, yes. If you stop shaving, then you get that gravitas, apparently. When they joined Fox News in 2009, they were the leading ideological players in a very different conservative movement of the George W. Bush years. Hayes had championed the invasion of Iraq at the Weekly Standard. How did that go? Well, Goldberg had just published a book called Liberal Fascism. They now find themselves in a group of Americans who think that the threat that Trump poses to America's democratic system. Okay, here's the official verdict. Trump ran for re-election. He got beaten by Joe Biden. Shouldn't this prove to these morons that the democratic system works? Hayes said that he was particularly concerned about Fox lending support to the idea that there's a domestic war on terror and it's coming for half the country. That's not true, except that we know from the Department of Justice that the FBI has been sicked on parents protesting school board. decisions. Particularly disturbing in Patriot Purge, Hayes added, was the imagery of waterboarding and suggesting that half the country is going to be subject to this kind of treatment, that it's the same kind of treatment that the federal government used when it went after Al-Qaeda. With the Biden administration repeating almost constantly that Trump supporters are, white supremacists, domestic terrorists? How is that an unreasonable fear? Carlson pumped that stuff out into society, and all you need is one people out of every 50,000 people who watch it to believe it's literally the story about what happened, and that it's true in all of its particulars and all of its insinuations. And that's truly dangerous in a way that the usual hyperbole that you can get on a lot of cable news isn't. Oh, that white people are evil? That's what we get from CNN and MSNBC every single day. And in no way is that dangerous. Now, look, Darrell Brooks, my guess is that he was not an aficionado of MSNBC and CNN. That stuff leaks out into the culture and it affects everyone. For his part, Goldberg said he had been thinking about William F. Buckley, the late founder of National Review, who saw as part of his mission imposing seriousness on conservative arguments and purging some extreme fringe groups, including the John Birch Society, from the right. Whether it's Patriot Purge or anti-vax stuff, I don't want it in my name. And I want to call it out and criticize it. I don't want to feel like I am betraying a trust that I had by being a Fox News contributor. And I also don't want to be accused of not really pulling the punches. And this was just an untenable tension for me. But it gets better. It gets much, much better. Carlson called Hayes' and Goldberg resignations great news in the telephone interview Sunday. Our viewers will be grateful. Oh, and it gets better still. Yet resignations like Hayes' and Goldberg's remain rare at Fox. Cable contributor jobs are lucrative, often 6 figures or more, and open doors to book deals and speaking engagements. Senior journalists and producers at Fox typically receive a salary premium for the opprobrium that comes with working at the company in New York, Washington, or Los Angeles. That means there aren't easy ways to leave without taking a steep pay cut. There are lots of people there that I respect and like and consider friends, and they're making a decision based upon how to provide for their families and deal with their careers and all that, and I'm not going to second guess them, Goldberg said. And there are also lots of people over there who think that the Fox opinion side today is awesome. Now, don't you ever tell me you don't hear good news on my live stream. Oh, as was pointed out, what do you call a situation last year where, governors, mayors, police chief, allow actual insurrections, as we have seen in Seattle with the Chaz or CHOP, or in Portland, or just let the cities burn down for day after day? Well, some people would call that a failed state. And more evidence of this continues to accumulate. This is from Ryan Curry at ABC7 KGO in San Francisco. Multiple suspects have been arrested after a Louis Vuitton store in San Francisco was hit by thieves. Social media video shows some of the chaos that has unfolded there tonight. Smashed store windows, police, and people running in the street. The store in Union Square looked completely empty, apparently ransacked by robbers. Police say that around 8:10 p.m., officers responded to reports of possible looting and vandalism to retail establishments in the Union Square area. The San Francisco Police Department did not specifically name the Louis Vuitton store, although it is clearly seen in the videos obtained by ABC7 News. Officers arrived on scene to a retail store in Union Square where they observed several suspects involved in criminal acts. Officers have arrested multiple suspects. They say that the Louis Vuitton store may not be the only one that was hit. Officers are continuing to respond to other retail establishments where reports of vandalism are occurring. And of course, this story does not include the very relevant news that now the law is in the state of California that you can steal up to $950 in merchandise or services and not be criminally charged. How about that? It's almost like an incentive This is also from ABC 7 News. From Walnut Creek, California, new video shows a large police presence at Walnut Creek Saturday night, where witnesses says about 80 looters targeted Nordstrom. The first incident was reported at 8:46 p.m. while the store was still open. Two employees were assaulted and one was pepper sprayed by the suspects. Officers arrested two people, one of whom was in possession of a firearm. A third person was arrested nearby. A short time later, in possession of stolen Nordstrom property, police added. A manager at a nearby restaurant says his stunned customers just watched as the thieves grabbed merchandise, loaded it in waiting cars, and drove off. P.F. Chang's manager, Brett Bardet, said, "We probably saw 50 to 80 people in ski masks crowbar a bunch of weapons. They were looting the Nordstroms right there, and I thought they were going to start beating cars. I had to start locking doors, lock the front door, lock the back door." A BMW convertible was stopped by police, believed to be somehow connected with the mayhem there. Again, no mention of the law in California. And let's have a roundup here of accusations of sexism, racism, and transphobia from the Daily Mail, which again is one of the few newspapers in the Western world which actually reports news. This is from Jonathan Bucks. Abusive internet trolls called Dame Helen Mirren racist and an Israel worshiper for playing Jewish state's only female leader, Golda Meir, in new biopic. Internet trolls branded her racist. Yes, the film Golda is set during the Yom Kippur War in 1973 when Arab states attacked Israel. Dame Helen described Meir as a formidable, intransigent, and powerful leader and said it was a great challenge to portray her at the most difficult moment of her extraordinary life. But critics on social media described the production as fascism, sick, and tasteless. One Twitter user who said they were Palestinian proud wrote, "How sick making a biopic on criminal Golda Meir, and yes, no surprise, Helen Mirren, the racist, is happy to portray the pure, distorted version of a disgusting individual." Another wrote, "Helen Mirren doing a film about the first female prime minister of Israel is a slap in the face to all the people of Palestine. They are literally celebrating taking over Palestine and taking families out of their homes, murdering children, families, tasteless films." Yeah, that happened some years before the Yom Kippur War. But these people are not particularly good at history. And again, from the Daily Mail, from Charlotte Griffiths, a distinguished dancer has called on strictly to ban the use of the term same sex when referring to couples, as he says it is discriminatory. Joe Bio, who has won British and German championships and is the dance partner of former Strictly star Christina Rihanoff, has said that the ballroom industry now prefers to use the term equality dance couples, gender-free dancers, or in some cases, mixed dance couples. He has hit out at Strictly for occasionally using the term same-sex couples when describing the show's contestants. He wrote to the BBC, "Strictly is late to the party. Same-sex couples who are now known by equality dance couples have been on screens before. Get it right." Speaking to the Mail on Sunday last night, he added, "We no longer use the term same-sex couples in our community. I'm sure Strictly are aware of this. And if they aren't, then the choreographers certainly will be. This is because if you do not identify yourself as male or female, if you are non-binary or trans, you don't want to be put into the same-sex category." These are the most obnoxious people in the world. And yeah, one reads a lot of stories about troublesome neighbors from England. A lot of these stories end really, really badly, with murder or suicide. The drummer from Sparks, Dinky Diamond, in their island period, just had neighbors from hell, as they called them, who just made him and his wife's life a misery for years in all manner of ways, and he ended up topping himself. This is from Latoya Gale. A man who took to social media to share a noise complaint letter his friend received from their neighbor has sparked a heated debate about racism. Posting under the handle El Papi Show, the man who lives in London admitted the letter felt like an insult and asked his 1,283 followers on Twitter if they could spot the racist remark. Responses to the post were torn over the bottom paragraph of the letter, which seems to reference the Black Lives Matter movement by saying, "We sincerely respect your lives and space and genuinely believe that it matters." It continued with the sentence underlined, "Hope similarly you can respect our lives and the environment that we choose to live in too." The letter begins, "Last night, you once again decided to play very loud music from before midnight. This carried on till the early morning of Saturday. I am not sure if you realize that the bass sound of the loud music permeates through the walls, ceiling, and floor of your apartment and makes it very difficult for us to sleep. I hope you understand and appreciate this very genuine grievance of your neighbors." And El Papi Show responded, "Look at this rank-facedy letter my friend got from his neighbor. Can anyone spot the racism?" Rank-facedy, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is described as Jamaican patois for disgustingly rude. So it would seem to me that these presumably white people, the neighbors, thought, we're going to get into a whole bunch of trouble if we complain about our neighbors being loud in the early morning, so we'll just let them know that, we really respect their BLM. And of course, it backfired. Because of course it did. And J.K. Rowling is in the news again. And this is from Daniel Hussein and Martin Robinson. J.K. Rowling has blasted 3 trans activists for trying to intimidate her after they protested outside her house before posting a picture of her address on social media. The author, 56, has faced accusations of transphobia after she mocked an online article in June 2020, which used the words "people who menstruate" rather than "women." She later defended herself against the claims in a passionate essay, but has continued to face criticism. Rowling is a notable absence from the upcoming Harry Potter 20th anniversary reunion in light of her views. In the latest chapter of the saga, 3 activists posed outside Rowling's Edinburgh home while holding pro-trans signs last Friday. The author's address was clearly visible in the background of a photo of the activists and was widely shared on Twitter. Hitting out at the trio, Rowling accused them of doxing her and trying to intimidate her for speaking up for women's sex-based rights. She named them as Holly Stars, Georgia Frost, and Richard Energy. She also revealed that she has received so many death threats over the trans row that she could paper the house with them. Downing Street has criticized the targeting of J.K. Rowling by trans activists. The Prime Minister's official spokesman said, "I don't think any individual should be targeted in that way." Holly Stars later posted a statement on social media saying that they had removed the photo after being inundated with abuse. So we see who the real victims are here. Stars is a popular drag queen with her own Amazon Prime series. She is also a stand-up comedian, comedy writer, cabaret host, and seen as one of the UK's most popular drag talents. She is the writer and star of West End show Death Drop, currently embarking on its first UK tour, and also produces and presents a monthly Soho cabaret. Richard Energy, one of the other activists, is a drag king and comedian who performs. Have you ever heard that phrase, drag king? Who performs across London. He has appeared in several contests and is considered a growing star in the scene. Georgia Frost, the third activist, is an actress who has appeared in BBC productions, including Casualty and sitcom The Other One. And there's a picture of them here. Trans Liberation Now, says one sign. Don't be a sissy, CIS and then SY in different colored type. Get it? Sissy, get it? Trans rights are human rights. And this I'm looking at a picture. Oh God. Oh, of Holly Stars. And it's just if you didn't believe in Satan before, after looking at this, yes, you will believe that Satan is real. And let's go back to the chat. Drag King is the reverse of drag queen, says Divot the Gnome. Yeah, okay. Don Willis, hello, says Latin drag kings, a gangland whimsy. There have been 3 straight days of these mass looting attacks in the Bay Area, says Dr. A Dead Name. Someone quotes, Don Willis quotes from the Ramones song Warthog. Sick, sick, sick. It's the price I pay. It's a sick world. What can I say? They steal, they cheat, they take. Hello to Yo Mama. Kontiki Relay says difficult to post today without being inflammatory. This is where we are now. Hello to respectable commenting name. Hello to Professor Paul Kakvar, who says we should sell California to China. Dr. Dead Name says I'm going to California to do a little shopping. The fringe has been more right than wrong. Texas Feral Hog says that Biden got all those votes without campaigning, an even more extraordinary feat. Indeed, it is. One might call it miraculous. And okay, William F. Buckley. It's hard to imagine a man, an American in recent history who destroyed his legacy as efficiently as he did. I mean, he presided over the emasculation of the conservative movement. Of course, as I pointed out many times, after the formal dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, there was no longer any excuse for movement conservatism. Chococan 666 says, yes, in Chicago too, Miracle Mile shops cleaned out. This has been going on, these attacks on Miracle Mile shops in Chicago for a number of years now. And I just wonder how long the Miracle Mile is going to last for. Someone was joking somewhere on the internet about what was going on in San Francisco, reminiscent of Bogota. And someone responded, no, not reminiscent of Bogota, because if they had tried this in Bogota, the private security with the submachine guns would have made short work of them. Thanksgiving got bulldozed over because it has an uncommercial spirit, says a Yo Mama. For some reason, the human psyche wants to celebrate things before they actually happen. I've noticed this especially in the past 5 years. Well, Christmas is kind of a problem for Christians now, because you don't want to be in, the actually camp that, this is Advent, which is a penitential season. The way it goes is fast and feast throughout the year. But now it's just feast all the time. And, so you're one of those people who doesn't start celebrating Christmas until Christmas Day. Or if you wanted to be, really, well, actually, you could say, well, sundown on Christmas Eve. That's when Christian feasts start, at sundown. What did they conserve again, says Jonathan Paul. Well, no, nothing. Yo Mama says, I live in the middle of Trump country. Today I saw a pickup truck with a great big satanic emblem window sticker. Okay. And things are, well, how long can they keep this narrative up? You know what narrative I'm talking about. Let's look at the Drudge Report. Merkel warns new COVID spike worse than anything seen. Oh, dear. And we have protests, riots around the world. But I made a prediction a couple of weeks ago, and this prediction has come true. You see, for the last few months, we've been told that we all have to get vaccinated. And never mind those figures that we're getting from Israel, Ireland, England, and Scotland, because apparently the physiology of those people is radically different from our own in Canada and the United States. Well, very satirical. This is from Cody Wilson at CP24. Ontario is reporting more than 600 new COVID-19 cases as the number of breakthrough infections surpasses new cases among unvaccinated individuals today. Of the new cases reported today, 286 involve those who are fully vaccinated. 282 are in people who are unvaccinated. 36 involve individuals with an unknown vaccination status. And 23 are in people who have received one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. More than 78% of all Ontarians have received at least one dose, and that number is expected to jump in the coming weeks as children ages 5 to 11 receive their first shot. I have to try and control my temper after reading that. The province announced today that it plans to open up vaccination appointments to children in that age cohort starting tomorrow, following the approval of Pfizer's COVID-19 pediatric vaccine in Canada. This is really going to provide incremental help, Dr. Isaac Bogach, an infectious diseases specialist at Toronto General Hospital, said. Obviously, there are fewer people who are going to get sick with COVID-19 who will get infected, but it also means fewer people that they will infect, including classmates, people in their extracurricular activities, family members. This is just less amplification of the virus when you have more and more immune people. And here's a story from the Gateway pundit, Jim Hoft. This is from the UK. Vaccinated people under 60 are dying at twice the rate of unvaccinated people in the same age group. I suppose you could draw certain conclusions from that, but no. We all must get vaccines, and we all must push our children into vaccination centers to get them vaccinated. And if the experts say that it is so, then it is so. Now, William Briggs, who is a professional statistician, took some issue with what a certain Substacker, initials AB, had posted about this. It begins, I rarely ask, but please spread this post far and wide. It's important. Update, I was too used to writing COVID deaths. These are all cause deaths from table 4 in the ONS report, not just COVID deaths. Dumb, idiotic mistake. Sorry, all stays the same below. Figures and numbers are and were fine, except I erased COVID and put all cause in 2 spots because I mislabeled it. Many are asking about death rates in the vaxxed and unvaxxed in England because of a post by Berenson. Death rates by vaxxed and unvaxxed depend on age. The vax has some waning efficacy for the old, but it's not good for the young. Let's see the details. And the source is ONS. Which is the Office for National Statistics. So this is not a conspiracy theory, all right? And the data is richer than Berenson shows and is presented by ONS in 4 age brackets, 10 to 59, 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 plus, and 4 vax status buckets, unvaccinated within 21 days of first dose, 21 days or more after first dose, second dose. It's most unfortunate they don't break the young out separately. The data runs from January through the end of September 2021. October and November are missing. The data are weekly number of all-cause deaths and the population size of the age and vax group for that death. And yes, as we see waning efficacy. Let's discuss the population sizes first, since it's easier and because it is key. Start with the older group, the 80 plus, and work backwards. It's very plain the oldest got vaxxed first. The waves of increasing vax status. No vax shrinks, less than 21 days, rises, then shrinks, etc. This starts first in 80 plus, then 70 to 79, then 60 to 69. It's here the limitation of not separating out the young in the 10 to 59 group first shows, since most under 17 to 20 or so are not vaxxed, but many 20 and above are. Anyway, you can clearly see the number of unvaxxed in all but the young is very low, whereas the unvaxxed necessarily started out high in each group, which is key to recall that people can and some must show up in each vax group at different time periods unless they stay unvaxxed. This means when considering deaths, we have to think about who got vaxxed and when. It's also plain the vax rates for the older folks have maxed out and did so months ago. Unless England wants to be like Austria is contemplating and ship the unvaxxed to camps where they can concentrate on their unvaxxed status before being invited to large buildings where the vax will be forcibly administered, perhaps in gaseous form. Danke, Herr Schallenberg. More on that tomorrow. Let's start with the 80-plus death rates. The red unvaxxed figure is higher than the purple two-shot, but it appears the gap is closing. This is almost certainly because the powers of the gene therapy treatment, which causes your own body to produce spike proteins, wanes in time. But all this has been steady since about June. And as I say, you can find this at wmbriggs.com. And what does fully vaxxed mean? It's a shifting target, isn't it? Again, this is from Gateway Pundit. This is from Christina Lila. Dr. Fauci on Sunday told CNN's Dana Bash that Joe Biden is open to changing the definition of fully vaccinated to include booster shots. The CDC recently endorsed COVID booster shots for all adults, so a new mandate will likely be imposed. The Biden regime will eventually require people to get a COVID shot every 6 months to a year and show proof of vaccination to work and travel. Does the definition of what constitutes fully vaccinated need to change now to include a booster shot? Dana Bash asked Fauci. We're going to follow that very carefully, Dana. We'll let the science and the data follow. So we're going to take a look right now at what the durability is of the booster. Wow, this really is a shifting target, is it not? And there is a story at Axios by Caitlin Owens, The New COVID War, Redefining Vaccinated. As health officials push COVID booster shots, a debate is quickly emerging around whether the definition of fully vaccinated should be changed to include an additional dose of the vaccine. Why it matters. Please stop talking down to us, Axios. We're 11 months into the vaccination program. In my view, if you were vaccinated more than 6 months ago, you're not fully vaccinated, Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont said. We are analyzing what we can do to create those incentives and potentially mandates for making sure that people are fully vaccinated, which means 3 vaccines, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham said Wednesday. The UK will adjust the definition to include booster shots, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Monday. And sailing close to the wind, these people are, and they have no idea. This is Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. National Institutes of Health Director Francis Collins has angrily called for anyone who spreads misinformation about COVID-19 online to be brought to justice. Yeah, there's a lot of us out here who are wondering about this concept of justice. Conspiracies are winning here. Truth is losing. This is a really serious indictment of the way in which our society seems to be traveling, Collins told the Washington Post. Citing an onslaught of angry messages directed at Dr. Fauci, who Collins appears to believe is above criticism, the bureaucrat demanded that those responsible for such behavior be identified and brought to justice. The article cited one such example of misinformation, being Fauci's involvement in barbaric experiments conducted on dogs by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, despite the fact that such cruelty factually occurred under Fauci's leadership. While Collins didn't specify what he meant by brought to justice, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla previously asserted that individuals who spread false information about COVID vaccines are criminals who have literally cost millions of lives. That's an interesting benchmark, given that it was once considered false to claim that COVID vaccines didn't stop the vaccinated spreading COVID, which is now an all too obvious fact. Quite what constitutes misinformation about COVID-19 is anyone's guess, given that several things that turned out to be plausible are true, such as the origin of the virus behind the Wuhan lab, were once deemed to be misinformation. Oh, and Dana Bash previously mentioned, thought she was going to have some fun. Oh, I'm looking at this woman's face. She seems to have one mode, which is scold. She thought she was going to have some fun with Winsome Sears, who is the recently elected Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, where what's your vaccination status? And Winsome Sears says, I'm not going to tell you. I'm an American. We have freedom in this country. Have you ever heard of the slippery slope? And I fear that we're going to find ourselves at the bottom of a mountain and wonder how we got here. And Dana's scold face was turned up to 11 during all this. Very amusing, I must say. And this is from Reuters. Disney World near Orlando, Florida, has put its COVID-19 vaccination mandate on hold, a spokesperson said Saturday. The move comes amid the Biden administration's workplace COVID-19 vaccine rule, which requires businesses with at least 100 employees to require staff get vaccinated against COVID-19 or be tested weekly and wear a face covering at work. And where Joe Biden gets the constitutional authority to mandate this is an interesting question. This is Kane from Kane at Citizen Free Press, and more good news. Sky News reports 50,000 people in the streets of Melbourne. Similar big numbers in Sydney as well. Seems that, a lot of Australians have been pushed as far as they're willing to be pushed. But it doesn't look like Australia is going to be the worst problem in the world. This is that Substack previously mentioned, written by a fellow whose initials are AB. I've heard from multiple people now that Comcast is sending unreported truths emails to spam, no matter how many times users mark them otherwise. Here's an email. My father is a professor at a large, well-regarded medical school. I tried to forward him your email regarding the heart issues from the vaccine, and you can never guess what happened next. I immediately received a return to sender message with the explanation that it was spam or junk. I have forwarded him many things throughout his multi-decade career, never received something like this. Shocker that it would be turned away when calling out effects. I thought you would find this interesting. I've also heard that some hospitals are blocking all access to unreported truths on their networks because science. It's all about making sure people can't have access to data that might make them question dogma. Yeah, I'll have something to say about dogma as well in just a minute. Let's take a look at the Daily Skeptic.org, formerly Lockdown Skeptics. I go there every day, and, has Boris caved on Christmas yet? Because it's only a matter of time, right? Dan Andrews could force kids as young as 5 years old to get COVID vaccine. He is the Premier of New South Wales. A scene from the thick of it. I love how this show exaggerates the incompetence of our politicians for comedic effect. Oh, wait. That's from Jonathan Pye, the comedian. Boris Johnson gave a speech which led people to suggest that he'd lost his mind or was drunk or perhaps on psychedelic drugs. He started talking about Peppa Pig at a great length, just riffing wildly. And at one point, this was to the Confederation of British Industry. He forgot where he was in the speech, and most amusing. Lord Sumption blasts authoritarian European regimes. The religious faith of European leaders in vaccines will end in the imprisonment of the unvaccinated. This is a prediction by Toby Young. 62% of the general public support mandatory booster jabs, according to YouGov poll. Vaccine passports make no sense as the vaccinated are more likely to be infected, scientists tell MP. Yes, these are scientists. Kenya to ban the unvaccinated from indoor spaces despite only 10% of the population being jabbed. Conditional on infection, the vaccine may not protect against death in over 60s. This is based on a large Swedish study. Discouragingly, the decline in effectiveness was most pronounced among older, frail individuals, the group most at risk from COVID. Germany's tourism commissioner, and of course, I definitely want to hear from the tourism commissioner, says that mandatory vaccination is imminent. And a truly, truly frightening rhetoric coming out of Central Europe. And I don't know. 2 years ago, I would have said that this could never happen. But one doesn't get far these days without a sense of wonder. Oh, this page has disappeared. Why would it have disappeared? Germans will be vaccinated. Hang on. Yeah. Germans will be vaccinated, cured, or dead, says Cabinet Minister. How about that, huh? Vaccinated, cured, or dead. Okay. This is still up on The Guardian, even though MSN removed it. Okay, most Germans will be vaccinated, cured, or dead from COVID-19 in a few months, the country's health minister has warned, as Germany's southern neighbor Austria put its population of 8.9 million back under a nationwide lockdown. Probably by the end of the winter, more or less everyone in Germany will be vaccinated, cured, or dead, the health minister Jens Spahn said. That sounds cynical, but that is the reality. The outgoing chancellor, Angela Merkel, told leaders of her conservative party that measures being taken to stop the spread of the coronavirus were insufficient and that stronger action needed to be taken. We are in a highly dramatic situation. What is in place now is not sufficient, she told CDU leaders in a meeting, according to Reuters. And I want to talk a little bit more about Austria. And I came across several articles about a fellow called Tony Faber, who is a priest at St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. This is a priest called Tony, Toni, not Anthony, no, but Tony. This is from Katholisch.de. Tony Faber, cathedral priest in Vienna, St. Stephen's Cathedral, defended the vaccination campaign in the church against criticism. The demand proves us right, he told the Cologne online portal domradio.de Friday. Queues formed in front of the cathedral at the start of the campaign. This is a story from August. And many people thanked them for the offer. So we see what the real religion is for the Catholic Church in Austria. Of course, what goes on in their churches and cathedrals is not based on the veneration and consumption of the Eucharist, but on the veneration and consumption of vaccines. They're worshiping a false god. And the words of the book of Matthew come to mind. Woe upon you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, that will award to God his tithe, though it be of mint or dill or cumin, and have forgotten the weightier commandments of the law, justice, mercy, and honor. You did ill to forget one duty while you performed the other. You blind leaders that have a strainer for the gnat and then swallow the camel. Woe upon you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, that scour the outward part of cup and dish, while all within is running with avarice and incontinence. Scour the inside of cup and dish first, thou blind Pharisee, that so the outside too may become clean. Woe upon you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites that are like whitened sepulchres, fair in outward show, when they are full of dead men's bones and all manner of corruption within. And so let's hear more from Father Faber. Again, this is from catholic.de. Viennese cathedral priests have no pity on those who have not been vaccinated. As of today, there are strict restrictions for people in Austria who are not vaccinated against COVID-19. Father Faber supports these measures and has no sympathy for those who now have to stay home. This is absolutely shocking. Well, given what I know about the Catholic Church since the Second Vatican Council, perhaps not so shocking. The excellent site, Eugippius, EUGYPPIUS.substack.com, is covering this story. Eugippius is a pseudo-anonymous German. In angry rant, state media anchor demands Austrian-style vaccine mandates for Germany. As Saxony and Bavaria announce closures and cancel Christmas markets in the face of surging infections, the press unfolds a coordinated campaign to blame the unvaccinated. Below, I translate this disturbing speech by state media anchor Sarah Fruhauf, spitting nails at the unvaccinated. Even if you don't speak German, I recommend you watch at least a few seconds first to get a taste of her worrying, hysterical demeanor. Quote, to all the vaccinated, thanks a lot. Thanks to you, it looks like we'll be spending this winter in lockdown. Once again, many places won't have Christmas markets, and once again, we may not be able to celebrate the Christmas holidays with our families. The measures announced in Saxony and Bavaria are a slap in the face to all those who have shown solidarity in recent months, to all those who have been vaccinated. No question the restrictions are necessary, but they wouldn't have been necessary if more people had acted responsibly. I could go on, but we know what the data what the data show. We know, even in Ontario. Now, even in Ontario, and here's more from Eugippius. Martin Lichtmesch on the dystopic vaccinator dictatorship of Austria. Austria has announced a general lockdown and Europe's first population-wide vaccine mandate. Below, the Austrian writer and translator, Martin Lichtmesch, reports it directly on conditions there. It looks like I was too optimistic last month. Unfortunately, there can be no talk of any corona twilight in Austria right now. Our government, under the leadership of the unelected shadow chancellor, Alexander Schallenberg, has now ordered in rapid succession an escalating series of tightened measures, and their repressive character dwarfs all that has preceded them. I published a detailed account for the magazine Freilich. This escalation reached its climax today. All of a sudden, the government has announced a full lockdown beginning on Monday for all of Austria, as well as a fixed general vaccine mandate from February 2022, coincidentally corresponding to the end of flu season. This also means forced boosters for everyone who thought they were finished after the first 2 jabs. Lichtmesch forwards a highly plausible late-breaking rumors on penalties. Whoever does not comply will face a fine of 3,600 euros. Whoever cannot pay will be jailed for 4 weeks. The vaccine subscription is also priced in. For refusing any subsequent booster, the fine is 1,450 euros, or once again, 4 weeks of incarceration. Although the style of governments has been ongoing since March 2020, the brazen authoritarianism of these decisions and their attendant massive assault on the liberty of the people, unchecked by any constitutional concerns or even rational considerations, has become deeply frightening. Our country can now justly be called a dictatorship. And of course, we know whose side the Catholic Church in Austria is on in this, which brings me to a piece by Michael Hurley, an American thinker, COVID-19 and the Smoke of Satan. For several years, until only recently, I resided in the great city of London. I was there when Imperial College terrorized the world with a projected 3.5% infection fatality rate for COVID-19, after which the British Prime Minister, followed by a hapless American president and leaders around the world, decided to lock healthy people in their homes indefinitely. I was there when the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Catholic bishops of Britain pleaded with the government to close the churches. I was there when the Church of England forbade its priests to answer the urgent call of the NHS for additional volunteer chaplains to minister to the sick and dying, for fear that soothing and saving these dying souls might endanger the mortal lives of those priests. It was then that I knew that this was no ordinary crisis, nor was it about a virus. In the months since I left London in September 2020, I've kept in touch with a handful of writers there who, like myself, spoke out strongly against the lockdowns, but who, unlike myself, have been strangely ambivalent about the push for universal experimental gene therapy to combat a disease that is, well, I won't repeat that. It almost seems as if the lockdowns were a successful shock and awe campaign to soften up a public eager to get round the pub again, to accept whatever conditions might be imposed for that to happen. Early in the lockdown debates, one such British writer would often insist that he would one day soon, through reason, logic, and persuasion, win the argument with his fellow Britons that the government's response to the virus was needlessly heavy-handed and ineffective. That never happened. Nearly a year after the first lockdown, 80% of the British public was clamoring to be locked down even harder. As I wrote at the time, the Britain of today is a health and safety culture that has largely abandoned the religious faith that once gave it a sense of transcendent meaning. As a result, it finds itself obsessed with every threat, real or imagined, to its materialist worldview, and sees goblins of risk and impending doom around every corner. At the time I wrote those words, I scarcely would have guessed the same observation could soon be made about much of the United States. And for that matter, does anyone even recognize Australia anymore? It is the worldwide nature of this psychosis and the fact that so much of the world is blind to the madness that only a small minority sees plainly that caused me to urge these British writers to wake up and recognize that the vaccine is not a cure, but merely another aspect of the disease, and that we are engaged in the battle not against the virus or for people's health, but against fear and for our souls. I've never been much of an apocalyptic thinker, Hurley continues, or prone to see the heavenly forces everywhere writ large on the canvas of history. God plays the long game, and history is littered with fools who presume to know and tell others exactly what God was up to in the course of human events. I don't aspire to be one of them, but for me, there was immediately and remains something noticeably different about this COVID phenomenon. For starters, there is the never before in history decision of the worldwide Catholic Church, to say nothing of the worldwide Anglican communion, to shut its doors and abandon the flock out of the fear of mortal death, which the Bible plainly tells us is Satan's stock in trade. There is no possible explanation for a decision by prelates of the church to refuse Christ's injunction to Peter, "Feed my sheep," that does not end in abject disobedience. There is no benign explanation for the willful decision to deny a starving world the imperishable bread of heaven, which is the Eucharist, and exchange it for the perishable bread of this world, which is the fleeting illusion of physical health and material comfort that the bishops sought to purchase by closing the churches. It was an astonishing, utter, and total abdication of the most obvious and fundamental tenets of the Christian faith. If we cannot recognize Satan in a conspicuous, unapologetic, worldwide abdication of the faith by the princes of the church, we have no hope of recognizing him in our own lives. But there is more. There is a kind of spiritual blindness that has descended over the church and the world that is eerily apocalyptic in its own right. Not only have the prelates of the church abdicated the Christian faith, but they appear to be unaware that they have done so. They now cheerily pass the collection plate and propose to carry on as though what has just happened was perfectly normal, necessary, and done out of their love for their fellow man. Other bishops demonstrated an even more profound blindness, now proposing to withhold the sacraments of eternal life from those who cannot produce proof of having received a vaccine to protect their mortal lives. What hope of salvation would the leper, whom Jesus touched with his bare hands in violation of Jewish law, have had in the hands of these frightened hirelings? Blindness, well-intentioned perhaps, but blindness nonetheless, best explains their otherwise inexplicable ignorance of these people. And here again, Christ gives us the explanation. Christ spoke of those at the last judgment who would experience genuine surprise that they were found among the goats. That among these will be many luminaries of the church, we need have no doubt, as we are told that they will protest in vain. Matthew 7:22, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? It is in the juxtaposition with truth that Satan is most clearly revealed. He does not merely tell Eve that she will get away with it if she eats of the forbidden tree. He tells her, ye shall be as gods. Satan deals in whoppers. Lately, we have seen his calling card in the COVID crisis. For a disease that 99.5% of the world survives without treatment or severe symptoms, we have rent the world asunder, and with it, very nearly the church. The sheer irrationality of it staggers the imagination. You might have seen that the late Jeff Epstein and his former squeeze Ghislaine Maxwell were blessed by the Pope, the Vatican. That would be Saint John Paul II. There's a story by James Beale and Nick Pisa at the U.S. Sun, the Pope, the Pedo, and the Pimp, beaming Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, blessed by the Pope, showing their all-powerful connections. The snap sees the pedo billionaire and his alleged madam enjoy a private audience with the head of the Catholic Church at the Vatican. This was in 2003. They are understood to have flown to Rome by private jet for the blessing by John Paul II almost 2 decades ago. A source told that The Sun, pictures like this show just how powerful Epstein's connections were in his ability to open almost any door. He managed to manipulate his way into royal palaces, the White House, and the Vatican, all with Maxwell by his side. Flight logs, which chart journeys made by sex beast Epstein, reveal he used his Lolita Express jet to fly from Rome to Madrid on May 20th that year. On it were Maxwell, model scout Jean-Luc Brunel, pilot Pete Rathgeb, and 2 passengers logged as AM and JK. Frenchman Brunel, 75, was charged last year with rape and sexual assault of minors. There is no suggestion Rathgeb knew of or was party to illegal activity. So how did this come about? Okay, well, I suggest it came about through the offices of Cardinal Stanislav Divish, who was the private secretary to John Paul II. And I'm going to read from Wikipedia here. Divish supported Roman Catholic priest Marcial Maciel of Mexico, the founder of the Legion of Christ and the Regnum Christi movement. Author Jason Berry wrote that Maciel spent years cultivating Vatican support by funneling money to the Vatican. Under Maciel, the Legion of Christ steered streams of money through Divish to the Pope and the Vatican stumps that were designated for use in relation to the Pope's private masses in the Apostolic Palace. Late in Maciel's life, he was revealed to have abused boys and fathered up to 6 children, 2 of whom he allegedly abused, with at least 2 women. Yes, well, it gets worse than that, because Cardinal Ratzinger tried for years and years and years to bring down Maciel. And as long as John Paul II was Pope, and as long as Divish was there accepting booty from Maciel, no action was taken against him. It was only after the death of the sainted John Paul II that Maciel was hounded in disgrace out of the church. But wait, there's more. Divish was instrumental in blocking an investigation into allegations of child abuse against the late Benedictine Cardinal of Vienna, Hans Hermann Grür. Grür died in 2003, headed the Vienna Archdiocese and presided over the influential Austrian Episcopal Conference. He always died wrongdoing, was praised by John Paul II as a faithful servant. The Roman Catholic bishops of Austria, however, were of a different opinion. On the occasion of their ad limina visit to Rome in 1998, the Austrian bishops informed the Pope that they, as a college of bishops, had reached moral certainty that the allegations against Cardinal Grür were true. And, this is from the U.S. Sun again, from Nick McDermott. It may be hard to believe, but drinking alcohol actually boosts potency. Men will be rejoicing after a study found moderate boozing slashed the risk of erectile dysfunction by nearly a fifth compared to teetotalers. It runs contrary to the commonly held idea that alcohol causes brewers' droop in amorous fellows. Experts think a drink raises nitric oxide levels, which widens blood vessels and improves circulation, crucial for a solid performance. The global study analyzed data on more than 210,000 men and the impact of alcohol on their erections. Moderate boozers up to 14 units a week had an 18% lower risk of impotence. And here is a story from the Daily Mail by Monica Greep. Blue-eyed women are the most attractive to men on dating apps, while men with hazel eyes receive the most matches from female singletons, a new study has revealed. The research conducted by U.S. contact lens supplier LensStore was carried out by creating profiles for a male and female model on Bumble, Tinder, and Hinge. Well, as it turns out, I have hazel eyes. So everything is coming up KMG. Let's talk about last night's episode of Succession. Before I get into the episode itself, there was a fascinating essay on Slate by a woman, I'm going to presume it's a woman, who rejoices in the name Lily Loughborough. Is Succession stuck in a rut? If the heyday of the anti-hero shows proved anything, it's that there's a built-in trap when it comes to shows about bad people. It is basically that badness, whether it registers as people being immoral or amoral, otherwise unmoved by the limits good people habitually accept, is incredibly fun to watch. It can, in shows like The Sopranos, for instance, be richly compelling. Most of us have some badness at our rotten little core, so it's pleasurable and interesting to see the complicated, compromised, and less savory parts of humanity. The parts we normal people spend a lot of energy keeping down, represented. Finally, badness is an engine. Breaking Bad is about a man who struggled to be good but felt emasculated by virtuous passivity, then learned to revel in the momentum badness afforded him. The point is this: badness makes a lot of prestige, TV prestige fun, and if the anti-hero experiments were implicitly testing just how bad a protagonist would have to be in order for audiences to reject him, the answer was frequently never. Forced to choose between morality and entertainment, the bulk of viewers tend to choose the latter unless they're absolutely beaten over the head with the protagonist's irredeemability. If he confesses, say, as Walter White did in Breaking Bad, that everything he did wasn't really for his family, but for him because he liked it. Well, if you think about The Shield, a series which I quite like and I've watched several times, the audience is first forced to make a decision in the very first episode of this show. Are you going to plump down for morality, or are you going to plump down for nihilism? Because if you plump down for morality, there is no point in watching The Shield. And I suppose a similar thing could be said about Breaking Bad, but of course Walter White becomes monstrously evil by degrees. The writer continues, the solutions to that generally interesting storytelling problem haven't really evolved. And I've been wondering whether Succession is in this regard more of the same or an exception. I suggested at the start of season 3 that Succession might be a sitcom dressed up as a drama, that it was repetitive rather than a propulsive, and this ought perhaps to be seen as a strength rather than a flaw. Still, this season is recycling beats to a surprising degree. Jerry is once again being asked to be a placeholder CEO. Shiv once again gets invited in only to be disempowered by Logan, and Logan's health once again incapacitates him for too long. Well, Jesse Armstrong could be said being part of the Armando Iannucci school, British comedy school. And as much as I love the thick of it, and as much as I loved Veep, there's a problem with both of them, which is characters are introduced and perhaps destinations prepared for them, but some of these characters pop on screen, as they say in Tinseltown. No, we don't want to get rid of a character that the audience likes. So you end up with characters who really have no right to be there. You know, after the change in government, after the change in leadership, what was clearly the Labour Party in the thick of it, Malcolm Tucker would not have been kept around. He simply wouldn't. The new leader would have brought in her own team. Similarly, in Veep, we have all of these holdovers after the transition from the vice presidency to the presidency, including the chief of staff. And that sort of thing just doesn't happen. And what I would say about Succession, and I'm greatly enjoying it as always, that we need to see some bodies being thrown off the troika. I mean, there's no other way. There's no other way to put it. I mean, what on earth is Greg still doing there? You know? And poor Tom, I'm really impressed with his character, and by Matthew McFadden, the English actor who plays him. We saw what last season depressed Kendall Roy. Well, now we have depressed Tom Wapsgams, and I'm beginning to wonder whether he's going to top himself, because he's going to prison. And, oh, well, yeah, but he has that lovely wife who loves him. Well, his lovely wife does not love him. She is horribly selfish. And, oh, no, she's not going to take herself, out of any kind of race to succeed their father by making a faux pas, such as, becoming pregnant by her husband. She's made this very clear indeed. Nope, not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Now, of course, Tom, there was outreach from Kendall. Look, I can save you. And Kendall is just, no, he's no good at running things. He's no good at scheming. He's the worst at all of these things. If you're going to try to bring, Tom over to your side, perhaps it would be a good idea not to insult him throughout the meeting. No. Very bad idea. Indeed. But he keeps up, and I'm going to take some pictures of you with my smartphone. What is blackmail material? He's no good. He's no good at reading people. He's just terrible at reading people. And of course, everyone is talking about what Tom said after the meeting was over in the parking lot. And I'm going to give you the Baudelarized version of this. Having been around a bit, my hunch is that you're going to get effed. Because I've seen you get effed a lot, and I've never seen Logan get effed once. Well, it's true. I mean, if you were a betting man, who would you bet on? Well, you wouldn't bet on Kendall because he fails at everything repeatedly. And of course, last night, Succession was dealing with politics directly in a way that it really hasn't done before, and specifying the Republican Party. Now, of course, there's a problem here because in the real world, Trump became president of the United States in 2017 and turned everything upside down. And that is not factored into the show. We have a nondescript Republican president who's been forced out by the news network ATN. And so who's going to be the next president? There's not much time. The convention is coming up soon. So there's kind of a beauty pageant that is arranged in Virginia. And there's various candidates, including the vice president and a Hispanic candidate and a dark horse, a fellow called Jared Mencken. Now, they did a better job of this, of looking at right-wing politics in this episode than they did in the episodes regarding the Tucker Carlson fellow at ATN, who was shown to be, pretty much an unrepentant Nazi. And you couldn't get where he was if that were true. But of course, we're supposed to be, scandalized that this Jared Mencken fellow does not think that the United States should be overwhelmed by people from Mexico and Central America. Crazy, I know. Oh, and all of his talk of Plato and Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine. Ooh, that talk about natural law. Very, very sinister. Very, very sinister, apparently. But Roman is coming to the fore, and he sees Mencken as a shifting the Overton window. Well, apparently, Roman has been paying attention to politics, despite what he says. Also bringing a lot of synergy, I know, dread word, to ATN, because he's not traditional. And Roman has this great rap about, how would you shake up ATN? Bring in all these crazy TikTokers and, the women with the guns and all that. And, but my favorite exchange of the night was between that duo, Greg and Tom. Greg says, some guy with an undercut just called me soy boy. And Tom says, oh, don't worry, Greg. This is a nice, safe space where you don't have to pretend to like Hamilton. And Greg says, I like Hamilton. Tom says, sure you do. We all do. Very funny. Very funny. I'm going to be talking about Disco Demolition Night in just a minute. Let's go to the stream. Kevin, did you get a big gay vibe between Roman and Jared in the bathroom? Says Popcasso 88. People are saying that. I didn't get that myself. No. I have gotten, the gay vibe between Tom and Greg, which he seems to turn on and off. I don't know. Maybe he grew up without any brothers or whatever. Maybe there was no, physical contact, between boys growing up. Maybe that's Tom's problem. Lamprey Milt, I always ask people who bring up anything political, how is this all going to end, in a sarcastic tone? Better Call Saul is the prequel to Breaking Bad, says Ashy Main Bravo, so it makes sense Walter White would make an appearance since he'd still be alive according to the timeline. Question Lango says, secret of KMG's non-stereotypical Canadian accent, just pronounce the vowel any damn way. Okay. My mother was from Britain, and I consumed a lot of, British television and movies as a child, which might have something to do with it. Another reason for this is that I read a lot of books that were not the kind of books that were read by my peers. So I frequently came across words that I never heard anyone use. And I had trouble with a lot of these, like misled. Well, it's pronounced misled, but I just thought according to the rules of English pronunciation, it should be pronounced misled. And I'm afraid I got ridiculed more than once for saying that. Supposedly Walter White is going to make an appearance in season 6 of Better Call Saul. I want this wrapped up, okay? I want it to shift to Omaha, entirely to Omaha. Yeah, we know it's not going to work out, between Saul and his girlfriend, who just seems to be, who wants to destroy herself and her career. Ashiman Bravo says, I thought Gail Bedecker was an underrated character in Breaking Bad. The guy was hilarious. What he was singing a Hindi version of that Major Tom song by what's his name? Peter Schilling. Absolutely hilarious. Jonathan Pohl says S.H.I.E.L.D. has some bad Armenian gangsters in it. Yes, indeed it was. Did Walter White do anything wrong, says Ashy Main Bravo. Yeah, he did a lot wrong, actually. Of course, there are holes in that. I've mentioned this before. If we take the show at face value, apparently New Mexico must have the worst teachers union in all of North America. And, why was he working at a car wash? I can kind of understand that. Someone like him could presumably make decent money as a tutor. you know, or teaching extension courses, at community college or whatever online. But no, he seems to be, alienated from academic pursuits, at least, formally expressed. It's so funny seeing him in the classroom. And, this is such an obvious gag, but his chemistry students were all one, ugly, two, stupid, and three, completely uninterested. Very funny, or so it seemed to me. Roulette systems. No, I don't gamble. Oh, can you hear that? Can you hear that? We got a lunatic screaming outside. Go on sabbatical? No, I'm not going to go on sabbatical. Not sabbatical at all. Nope, I intend to be here. And okay, let's talk about Disco Demolition Night, which was a baseball promotion. And it took place Thursday, July the 12th, 1979 at Comiskey Park in Chicago. And it was between the games of a twilight doubleheader between the Chicago White Sox and the Detroit Tigers. And I miss doubleheaders. I've only ever seen one Major League Baseball game in person at Shea Stadium, the old Shea Stadium in New York, 1985. But the idea that, people could watch two baseball games, as Ernie Banks famously said, great day for baseball, let's play two. But the greedy owners decided that, no, we can't have doubleheaders anymore. And even when they're, playing games that were rained out earlier in the season, they empty the stadiums between the games. So these promotions, these baseball promotions, there's just a history of disaster regarding them. Another famous one, or notorious one, was so-called 10-cent beer night. This was the Cleveland Indians put this on at Cleveland Stadium when they're playing the Texas Rangers on July the 4th, 1974. So normally, your cup of beer, I guess 3.2% beer, was 65 cents, and here it was 10 cents. And, well, you could imagine what happened. 10 cents per cup, up to 6 cups at a time. And I suppose one of the things that happens is that, spirits are high. Spirits are high at first, but then the alcohol begins to wear off and, the tiredness comes flooding in, and you have a bunch of drunk and surly fans, thousands of them, actually. Oh, what do we have? I'm reading from Wikipedia here. The Rangers quickly took a 5-1 lead. Meanwhile, throughout the game, the inebriated crowd grew more and more unruly. Early in the game, Cleveland's LaRon Lee hit a line drive into the stomach of Rangers pitchers Ferguson Jenkins, a Canadian, by the way, after which Jenkins dropped to the ground. Fans in the upper deck of the stadium cheered, then chanted, hit him again, harder, harder. A woman ran out to the Indians on deck circle, flashed her breasts, and then tried to kiss umpire Nestor Chilak, who was not in a kissing mood. As Grieve hit his second home run of the game, a naked man sprinted to second base and slid in, probably getting dirt in places unsuitable for speculation, in the words of one sports writer. One inning later, a father and son pair ran out under the outfield and mooned the fans in the bleachers. Although it is not clear why, I got a pretty good idea. Hundreds of fans had brought firecrackers, which they set off in the stands at random, lending the game a war zone ambiance that would seem increasingly appropriate. As the game progressed, more fans ran onto the field and caused problems. Ranger first baseman Mike Hargrove was pelted with hot dogs and spit, and at one point was nearly struck by an empty gallon jug of Thunderbird. The Rangers later argued a call in which Lee was called safe at close play on third base, spiking Jenkins with his cleats in the process and forcing him to leave the game. The Rangers' angry response to this call enraged Cleveland fans, who again began throwing objects onto the field. Someone tossed lit firecrackers into the Rangers' bullpen. An atmosphere made hazy by clouds of exploded gunpowder and marijuana smoke contributed to the unsettling mood. By the seventh evening, families and those fans who remained sober had mostly left the ballpark, while the remaining crowd continued to grow drunker. Sports writer Paul Jackson wrote early on the demand for beer surpassed the Indians' capacity to ferry it to the concession stands, and a luminary, perhaps the same person who suggested the promotion in the first place, decided to allow fans to line up behind the outfield fences and have their cups filled directly from Stroh's company's trucks. The promotion achieved critical mass at that moment as weaving, hooting queues of people refilled via industrial spigot. In the bottom of the ninth, the Indians managed to rally, tying the game 5-5, and had Rusty Torres on second base, representing the potential winning run. However, with a crowd that had been drinking heavily for 9 innings, the situation finally came to a head. After the Indians had managed to tie the game, a 19-year-old fan named Terry Yurkic ran onto the field and attempted to steal Texas outfielder Jeff Burrows' cap. Confronting the fan, Burrows tripped. Thinking that Burrows had been attacked, Texas manager Billy Martin, and Billy Martin is definitely the manager you want in a situation like this, charged onto the field with his players right behind, some wielding bats. A large number of intoxicated fans, some armed with knives, chains, and clubs fashioned from portions of stadium seats that they had torn apart, surged onto the field, and others hurled bodies from the stands. 200 fans surround the 25 Rangers, with more fans coming. Realizing that the Rangers' lives might be in danger, Cleveland manager Ken Aspromonte ordered his players to grab bats and help the Rangers, attacking the team's own fans in the process. Rioters began throwing steel folding chairs, and Cleveland relief pitcher Tom Hilgendorf was hit in the head by one of them. Hargrove, after subduing one rioter in a fist fight, had to fight another on his way back to the Texas dugout. The two teams retreated off the field through the dugouts in groups, with players protecting each other. The teams fled into their clubhouses and closed and locked the doors. The crowd pulled up and stole the bases and anything else it found. Rioters threw a vast array of objects, including cups, bottles, rocks, batteries from radios, hot dogs, popcorn containers, and folding chairs. Umpire crew chief Chilak, realizing that order would not be restored in a timely fashion, forfeited the game to Texas. He too was a victim of the rioters, as one struck and cut his head with part of a stadium seat, and his hand was cut by a thrown rock. He later called the fans uncontrollable beasts and stated that he'd never seen anything like what had happened except in a zoo. The rioting continued for 20 minutes. As Joe Tate and Herb Score called the riot live on radio, Score mentioned the security guard's inability to handle the crowd. It's not really much of a surprise, is it? What happened there? So 5 years later, we have Disco Demolition Night. And if you see Whit Stillman's movie, The Last Days of Disco, you will see a clip of Disco Demolition Night, because it all happened so fast. Disco ruled the roost. And then, no, we hate disco. Everyone hates disco. Disco sucks. And disco became a rather forbidden word. It was later called dance music, because we don't want to call it disco anymore. We don't want to say that disco made a comeback, because disco sucks. So, the team, the White Sox, was owned by the Veck family. Veck, as in wreck, as the book has it. And they're always looking for colorful promotions. This one was successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. And how it worked: if you bring a disco record to the stadium, we'll let you in for 98 cents. And what are they going to do with the disco records? They're going to make a huge pile of them, and then they're going to blow them up on the field. Now, one of the problems they had was, and the disc jockey Steve Dahl, who was the leading Disco Sucks DJ in Chicago, he was worried that this promotion was going to be a flop and it was going to be a tremendous embarrassment, not just to his radio station, but to him personally, maybe even drive him out of town. Well, I think I can explain what happened. As mentioned previously, Disco Demolition Night was the last time that the white American working class was allowed to have any say in popular culture. And the white American working class had decided that it hated disco again. Disco sucks. They wanted to listen to, Led Zeppelin or Boston or REO Speedwagon. And instead, the radio was dominated by disco. And perhaps worse than that, all of the nightclubs were dominated by disco. Now, it's been argued, for decades now, that the Disco Sucks movement was the result of racism and homophobia. Racism, no, I don't think so. The same Disco Sucks people, they grew up with black music. Black music was extraordinarily popular on AM radio well into the 1970s before, to a large extent, evolved into disco. As far as the homophobia part goes, again, the reaction to disco, it was black and gay. And it seemed like music, which a lot of these young white men took seriously, had been taken over by creepy, bad people. The fact that disco music was, gay, not really a surprise, not really a surprise. And the disco DJ culture was, overwhelmingly gay culture. And again, these white working class people thought that their culture, their music, their friend had been stolen from them and replaced by a malevolent imposter. That this dislike, it went in both directions. That, the white working class Americans hated disco, but the disco people hated the kind of people who didn't like disco. Yahoos from the suburbs, this sort of thing. So keep in mind, this was only, 2 years after Saturday Night Fever. And, I remember at the time, rock is dead, it's finished. Well, it's kind of finished now, but it made a comeback after the twilight of disco. But as people were actually saying, no. White music. Have you ever heard of this phrase, rockism? Yeah, the rock critics, the woke rock critics love this because even publications like Pitchfork continuously, apologizing for their history and their rockism. That is to say, we take some recordings more seriously than others. And in the 1970s, a band like King Crimson was playing in hockey arenas, that there was a great interest in technique. And there was a great, there were intellectual pretensions to rock music. There were no intellectual pretensions to disco music, none whatsoever. Also, disco music is, I must admit, sure, looking back in retrospect, I Feel Love by Donna Summer, Giorgio Moroder. That's pretty good. And Chic, they were pretty good. But so many of these bands were just novelty acts, and just the tyranny of the snare drum and of the beat, and oppressive in the sense that, if you go to a place, you go to a club and you go and see a band, say, well, the band will play a set and then they'll take a break. So you're not being deafened by the music. In discotheques, absolutely deafening. In fact, as soon as you step through the door, you just, the bass drum, the kick drum on your sternum. And it didn't end, ever. So we have this promotion, July the 12th, 1979. So bring in your disco record. And I don't know, maybe you could take one from your sister because your sister probably likes disco. And bring in a disco record and we'll let you in for 98 cents and we'll have a bunch of fun. And 50,000 people showed up, which was 2.5 times what the Vec family and team officials thought. Also, Steve Dahl, the disc jockey, what was he? His army? He had an army or a militia or whatever. And of course, this happened. This happened at Woodstock, and it was a routine in those days. People show up and they want to get in. And when enough people show up and they want to get in without paying, or even if it's full, they're going to get in. Because the security guards are not really, as we found out, in Cleveland, they're not really in a position to do very much. And so, well, if it's, I don't want to be run over by a bunch of deranged disco sucks teenagers, so we'll just let them in, which is what happened. And of course, how many people were actually at this game? Of course, I've seen many, many interviews about this, and it seems like any young man in Chicago claims that he was at that game. But of course, you're telling people to bring, records. And, some of them 45, 7-inch, but some of them 12-inch LPs. And apparently it never occurred to anyone that these are flying weapons. These are flying weapons. And, let's see, the tisking from Wikipedia. According to historian Gillian Frank, by the time of the disco demolition in Comiskey Park, the media cultivated a widespread perception that disco was taking over. Performers who cultivated a gay image, such as the Village People, described by Rolling Stone as the face of disco, did nothing to efface these perceptions, and fears that rock music would die out increased after disco albums dominated the Grammy Awards in February of that year. So everyone, this is a building up to a frenzy, because at halftime, we're going to blow up a bunch of disco records. Oh, yes. Dahl had his parody record, Do You Think I'm Disco? It would be difficult to explain to you just how high the critical evaluation of Rod Stewart was in the early 1970s. With his solo records and his records with the Faces, he was regarded as almost the new Bob Dylan, only rockier. And then he started making disco records like Do You Think I'm Sexy? And there was a genuine feeling of betrayal. Again, it's hard to bring this across. So we have the explosion. Oh, yes. And you can see there's tons and tons of video on this. And Steve Dahl, who's a chubby little man, he was dressed in camouflage, camo, and wearing a tin hat. And, driving a Jeep. And there we go. Dahl and Meyer warmed up the crowd, leading attendees in a chant of "Disco sucks." Lorelei recalled that the view from center field was surreal. On the mound, White House pitcher Ken Kravich, scheduled to start the second game, began to warm up. Other White Sox in the dugout, wearing batting helmets, looked out upon the scene. Fans who felt events were getting out of control and who wished to leave the ballpark had difficulty doing so. In an effort to deny the intruders entry, security had padlocked all but one gate. People get killed when that happens. This is now officially the world's largest anti-disco rally, Dahl yelled. Now listen, we took all the disco records you brought tonight and we got them in a giant box and we're going to blow them up real good. I like the SCTV reference there. Dahl set off the explosives, destroying the records and tearing a large hole in the outfield grass. Again, nobody seemed to have thought any of this through. With most of the security personnel still watching the gates, there was almost no one guarding the playing surface. Soon, the first of 5,000 to 7,000 attendees rushed onto the field, causing Kravec to flee the mound and join his teammates in a barricaded clubhouse. Some climbed the foul poles, while others set records on file or ripped up the grass. The batting cage was destroyed, and the bases were pulled up and stolen. Among those taken to the field was 21-year-old aspiring actor Michael Clark Duncan. During the melee, Duncan slid into third base, had a silver belt buckle stolen, and went home with a bat from the dugout. Sounds like a fun night. As Bill Veeck stood with a microphone near where home plate had been, begging people to return to the stands, a bonfire raged in center field. You know, when you get to the position when authority has to beg people to stop doing something, you've lost. You've lost. Now, again, I said before, again, and there was a forfeit here. White Sox forfeited the game. I have seen many, many interviews of people who were at the stadium, and it just seems that it was the most fun they had ever had in their lives. And, you know, if you've ever read about the Miami show that the Doors that Jim Morrison got arrested for, I've seen some complaints that, oh, the concert didn't last for very long. Yeah, well, a concert is a concert, right? Being in the middle of a riot where essentially nobody gets hurt, well, that's obviously far more memorable. Wouldn't you say? But, now Rogers, producer and guitarist for the disco-era band Chic, likened the event to a, wait for it, Nazi book burning. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. University of London professor Tim Lawrence wrote that the event was the culmination of the overproduction of disco, the investment by major record companies in music, their heterosexual white executives, boo, did not like, and the Disco Sucks campaign, which he argued was homophobic, sexist, and racist. Yes, I remember those days very well. And the band DOA, who were from Vancouver, who were crummy, okay? They're just crummy. And they had a single, it's called Disco Sucks. And I thought, okay, tell me something I don't know, okay? They're just lumpen. That's the best word I can use to describe DOA. But the 70s were a wild time in this regard. Things are so much more sedate, certainly in the music world, far more professional, you know. There's a site on the internet which has listings and descriptions of every concert played by Blue Oyster Cult. And there's an absolutely hilarious, many descriptions of, one of these concerts that, it lasts for several days and you have all these bands playing and you have these fly-by-night promoters, right? Where certain things like, washrooms, there are not enough washrooms, or the concessions are ripping people off. And then you have the eternal problem of people trying to sneak in without paying. And there's a description of this festival that Blue Oyster Cult played at, where it's just, I don't know, it's like that episode of The Simpsons, at Camp Krusty with the uprising, just like that. And then, of course, the fans break into the liquor. It's like free liquor for all. And then things start getting set on fire. I know I shouldn't laugh, but I began the show by pointing out that violence is fun. What Morris Baring once wrote, Like many of the upper class, he liked the sound of breaking glass, and it's not just the upper class, you know. But I guess there's two kinds of riots. There's two kinds of riots where people get killed or injured, or, you know, cities go up in flames, or, you know, a baseball field being torn up, that sort of thing. Anyway, the record industry learned lessons from the fall of disco, which is they could control the narrative, and they learned to control the narrative. You ever wonder why you wake up and suddenly Britney Spears is the biggest star in the world? Or one day you wake up and Adele is the biggest star in the world? There was something like about 8 different stories about Adele in the Daily Mail today. The whole world loves Adele. No, the whole world does not love Adele. Popular music is far less popular than it once was. I mean, not that long ago, you had to have an interest in pop music if you wanted to be au courant with the culture, and now you can ignore it completely because it's simply, it's niche. It's niche now. It's all niche. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Oh, wait, 70s fashion was almost unbelievably hideous, says Anne Run. Yes. The elephant bell bottoms that I recall. And you put them together with the with the platform shoes. And then not only are your feet and your ankles in agony from wearing these monstrosities, the platform the shoes are going to tear holes in your elephant bell bottoms, and you are at risk of, you know, pitching yourself forward, you know, head first into the concrete every time you went out in these stupid outfits. And yes, I wore the gear because everyone else was doing it, Mom. Where I lived, you could go to discos without dressing up in the attire, says Texas Feral Hog. Oh, Kyle says that he supports Black Lives Matter. I don't know. I don't care. What does that mean anyway? People say they support BLM. Oh, yeah, I don't think that Black people should be discriminated against, and I'm against innocent people being, you know, killed by cops. I mean, I suspect that's the sense in which Kyle Rittenhouse means it. Visionary Companion says the late 70s and the smarmy post-coital pornified cheesiness of it all. Ugh. Clothing, the shift to polyester jackets, polyester pants, polyester ties, lapels that came out to here, ruffled shirts at weddings, hair getting longer and longer and sleazier, you know, and the mustaches and the sideburns. It was just the 60s, the 50s and the 60s. Well, the 60s up until about 1966, 67, they'd been good fashion decades. And then it's weird. You know, you look at the 70s, the men looked like clowns and the women looked hot. That's what it was like. Punk was a lot more gay, says Texas Feral Hog, perhaps in New York City, but not in Britain. I read the oral history of punk rock, and it was really rather disgusting. Danny Fields and the like. Oh, yes. People, you know, showing up at the Port Authority and then, needing a place for the night and being plied with alcohol and drugs so they could be turned. You see that again and again. It's just disgusting. I know Sox announcers Harry Carey and Jimmy Pearsall, particularly Pearsall, were not amused. The way that Pearsall was carrying on about it, you'd think it was like the destruction of Rotterdam. I remember hating all of the pseudo-stylish silly suits and platform shoes and male nail polish ads and the Playboy philosophy finding its niche in dancing fool codpiece exhibitionism. You know, well, I remember the hair, you know, because I don't look good in long hair. I mean, everyone wanted to look like, you know, they were the court of Charles I. But when my hair reached a certain level, it started to kink up. And then I look like Trotsky, which is not a good look. But you couldn't have short hair. You just couldn't, because people would scream narc at you and the like. I mean, that actually happened. Ashley Main Bravo says, according to local New York State article, James Howard Kunstler was growing increasingly angry at losing his college-speaking gigs due to being labeled as a right-winger. That's interesting. He was on Jason Horsley's podcast and was very angry at the political left. He was cursing a lot and raising his voice and palpably snarling and gnashing. Well, I mean, Kunstler is a real lefty. That is to say, he has an interest, in the working class. And this identity politics has nothing to do with the working class. The people who have taken over the left absolutely despise the working class. A bold Prince Valiant tilted bowl cut is very aesthetic, says David Denon. Okay. Turtleneck sweaters. Okay, don't forget silk shirts with prints like chariots, gondolas. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sweaters. Pullover sweaters with little houses in a row with smoke coming from the chimneys, that sort of thing. Yikes. Yikes. Okay, so that's the show for today. What's coming up on the KMG show? On the book club on Friday, I am going to be discussing Empire of Pain, which is hang on, let me get the author's name because it's a long name. Empire of Pain by P.R. Keefe, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty. And, a very romantic movie on Theater Thursday. Leo McCarey's An Affair to Remember from 1957 with Cary Grant and Deborah Carr. And next week on Music Monday, I'm going to be talking about Mark E. Smith and The Fall. So that's it for today. I'll be back in the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show, and if you would like to make a donation to it, I very much appreciate the donations that have come in. And I can announce to you that I have now bought another month at this hotel, which will take me up to Christmas Eve. Hopefully, I will have gotten a check from the estate by then. But if you would like to make a donation, still very much appreciated. I can tell you my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.